Hi, and welcome to Coping During the COVID Crisis. I'm Janet Gross. Okay, it may soon be time to trade those comfy clothes and graphic tees for whatever used to be your work attire. You know, those clothes you actually used to wear when you actually traveled to work. A lot of us have gotten used to a more relaxed atmosphere working from home, and we've gotten used to a lot of things during the pandemic. Jobs and workplaces changed or morphed or disappeared. So how do we get ready to go back for those of us who are still going back? And what will that look like? What will that feel like? Dr. Roy Salgado, professor of counseling at the University of Holy Cross, joins us to talk about nearing the end of the pandemic and its restrictions. And a lot of factors and emotions are flowing through here because some people have gone back to work and they're, working through it already. Some people are just on the edge of it. Mm-hmm. Some people are wondering what it's going to look like if they go back.
Yeah, what popped into my head right now is just with the clothes and the attire, if you will. Earlier on in the pandemic, one of the things that Amazon, as well as other providers of consumer goods, talked about with regard to their metrics is that blouses and collared shirt sales went up, pants sales stayed neutral, and at some point went down. So we're going to have to go back out there and buy that second part of our attire to go out into the workforce in a face-to-face situation.
Right.
And that's not just the one thing. There's many things that we have to think about when we go back as well in terms of who's comfortable with what under what circumstances in a work setting. People in the service industry, they might have certain apprehensions in terms of what that would look like. Perhaps people who work in an office situation in terms of what that would look like. If you have a meeting that has been had over the course of the past year over Zoom and telecommunications, are they going to want to go back to a conference room that is 12 feet by 40 feet and whatever, and you have X amount of people in a room? Do they feel comfortable with that? Are all members of that team comfortable with it? And so employers and employees navigating those conversations as restrictions have been eased, as life is returning to a post-pandemic type of situation. These are conversations that people are having and ought to be having and figure out how to best proceed so as employers can get what they need and employees also have their needs met as well.
And I guess depending on your company or where you work, some of those things might be decided before you even step in the door. They might have already made the decision.
Right, and so deciding, what next? Am I welcome as an employee there, or do I need to look for alternatives? Or as an employer, how do I want to make things available to my employees? What's possible? And so, yeah, people
it's
are going to...
It's an unknown world. In some respects, it is an unknown world because you don't know what's going to happen when you come back.
Right.
All this remote, all these new changes that we've really been forced into, which has been great. Will it cost jobs? Will it change the way you do your job,
Yeah, I think all of the above. It will cost some jobs. I think new jobs will be reinvented and reimagined and recreated. And you'll have some that are just half and half, hybrids or whatever. We heard earlier on too with the real estate in Manhattan, in New York, all those skyscrapers that have been empty for the past year, employers and corporations realizing we can have our employees work remotely and we don't have to lease skyscrapers in the way that we had before. What a savings for a corporation. And then other more medium, small scale, small businesses thinking things through differently. And so at what point or under what circumstances will it be a requirement that people are on a work site, among others? And in what conditions or under what conditions would employees continue to work remotely? And these are things that are being discussed and thought through and redefined.
They really have to be thought through on the employer side because you don't want to, all of a sudden disband everything and then realize, well, we really kind of needed that interpersonal communication in the office because it really helped.
Right.
So, all these things are big decisions, and I'm sure that we're going to be working our way through them for quite some time.
Right. And, and here in the New Orleans area, we have two sectors. We have the service industry sector, which is a significant workforce. And then we have those who work in office settings, primarily healthcare and education. And so you're looking at two different ways of perhaps having to deliver goods and services, and so what is that going to look like in a restaurant or in a bar setting? What is that going to look like in a school, university, office setting? And so having those conversations so that goods and services can continue to be produced and provided for the public, as well as employees and employers being able to have those needs met and meet those needs. And there's a lot of conversations that are just going to need to be had.
And as an employee, you may have to have a conversation with your employer about what you expect, what they expect from you.
Right.
And those can be like stressful when you're thinking, oh, okay, A, I got to get work clothes, and then B, I have to dress up again, and then I have to have a real conversation that's going to involve more than just,
Yes, there's a hierarchy there. There's a hierarchy there. And so, there is an employer and there's an employee. And so then that is a reality. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And so for an employee, ideally, to be able to go and talk to an employer and say, this is my situation. This is my circumstance. What's possible? And for an employer to listen and say, okay, I hear you. That's not possible. Or, okay, let's see what we can do. And to really being open to make decisions. I know that employers have to contend with the bottom line. That's a very important factor, and we just need to be mindful of that. Employees also have families to think of and other situations that are independent of work. Human beings are not just, workers. They're human beings, and they have a work life and a family life. And so that work-life balance that employers perhaps could benefit from respecting and understanding, and employees understanding the employer's perspective of having to meet the bottom line so that people can remain employed.
Right. Yeah,
and so we need to really listen to one another so we can make best choices in a post-COVID easing of restrictions type of workforce.
And as we go back, there's got to be some anxiety with our lives. The balance, as you were just talking, really changed. We got more time to do things around the house. We got more time to spend with family and with kids who were always home. All those things really kind of, it tipped a little bit in the home favor for many people who worked from home. Right. Or were forced to, who didn't have a job and stayed home. So I think that, there's going to be some emotional upheaval and probably some peaks and valleys as we get back into a different way of life.
Yeah, I think of my work situation. I have been blessed enough to be able to have a type of employment where I have been able to work from home. And as such, cutting out the drive time, my garage looks spectacular in a way that it hadn't in years.
Right.
And so going back to the office and providing services to clients face-to-face or to students in a classroom face-to-face, that's going to take away time from home. Not a bad thing. It's just becoming aware that that's going to be an adjustment, a readjustment to less home time as opposed to what we had experienced in the past year, that in many ways has been a very good thing, because this also has to be tended to, and it's important as well. Work is important, and family life is important, and employees are not just workers, but also members of families, members of communities, and employers being mindful of that, and that this adjustment period of going back to work is something that we all need to take into consideration as we ease into the work situation, because everyone's going to ease into at different rates and at different comfort levels depending on their own particular experience.
Right. One thing that I did want to bring up before we take a break is the University of Holy Cross, for people who might need to talk some of these things through a little bit and don't have, and really need somebody who has experience. The University of Holy Cross offers the service free.
Yes. The Maronites of Holy Cross throughout this entire pandemic knew the value of people needing to talk things through and having a listening ear as they navigate through everything during the pandemic and now after the pandemic. Not that we're after the pandemic, but in this in this transitional period. And so any resident of Louisiana needs to do is call the number on the screen. The administrative assistant takes that call, triages it to the clinical director, who then assigns a counselor in training to the client. And you can get services from the get-go, unlimited number of sessions from here on out for free, as long as this situation persists.
Okay, and that is virtual, so it's no commute.
That's right, no commute, that's right.
So there you go with that. Okay, we're going to be talking a little bit more about that as we go on. When we come back, we'll also talk more about ways to make it through this transition easily. Stay with us.
Why don't you ever ever see elephants hiding in trees? Because they're really good at it. Yeah, I get it.
Welcome back. After more than a year of figuring out how to work differently, many people are about to see all that change again, but likely not back to the way it was. So more change, more adjusting. We've asked Kathy Leger, Assistant Professor of Counseling at the University of Holy Cross, to join us now. And the phrase, "it's going to be different," is one that we're kind of getting used to. And a lot of people are wondering what it's going to look like when we go back to work, and if we actually go back to work or work from where we are. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
I guess we're all like kind of looking at what it's going to be like and ups and downs that might come with that.
Yeah, a lot of companies are realizing that the employees, when they come back, if they decide to come back, are going to be going through a lot of anxiety, because when they come back, they're coming back from being home for over a year now, and they're going to be, they're going to be anxious because not everybody's been vaccinated. And even if you are vaccinated, you're still going to be wearing a mask. You're still going to be cautious about being with your social distancing. So you're still going to have all of these precautions you have to take. And a lot of the companies have decided that some things are going to stay remote. So companies like Google are deciding that they're going to stay remote. And then they have some companies that are going to do remote for like 3 weeks and then have you come into the office for 1 week.
Wow.
Or another company that someone I know works for, they have Zoom meetings where they have a conference. If they're working on a project together, they will have 1 week conference where everybody on that team meets together for a whole day to work on that project and introduce individual pieces of the project to put it together. Or if you're at the college like we are, we're going to have both. We're going to have face-to-face classes, and we're going to be teaching teletherapy, telecommuting.
Mm-hmm.
What's the word I'm looking for? We're going to be teaching online as well.
Right.
Okay. So we're going to have a wide variety of differences out there.
There are
Yes,
so
ma'am.
many things that, decisions that are going to be made along the way. Maybe some places won't have masks. Maybe some places won't, we don't even know what's going to happen. It's got to be, I think people are fatigued in making a lot of these decisions. And so I can understand how it would be stressful for people to go back and even perhaps should we be prepared to be overwhelmed just in case it happens?
Yes, ma'am. And there's going to have to be a lot of HR policies written and redone.
All right.
There may even be considerations for a new position that's going to be like a telecommuting director or a remote director or a remote CEO, because somebody's going to need to be in charge of all of this and keeping charge of these policies and keeping up with all the new government regulations.
Wow.
You're also going to need some IT infrastructure that's going to need to be updated, regardless. Okay? Because, as you know, the infrastructure, while it's been challenged and has been able to keep up somewhat, we've all had problems with the internet going down. So if companies are going to continue to stay online, as some are deciding to do, we're going to have to upgrade a lot of things for these companies to consider.
And that's a very interesting point that I hadn't thought of in terms of these new positions that would perhaps be coming to the fore as a result of this post-pandemic work situation. And so, there are things that we as employees or perhaps employers hadn't even thought of 3 months ago, that as the restrictions have eased and as things are opening up and people are moving back in, that you're having to get ahead of, in front of, because these situations are presenting themselves now and in the weeks to come.
and what those jobs will look like. That's really fascinating, Kathy, because you're thinking about, oh, you're going to have to, do you think you might have to have somebody monitor some of these things, you know, with the whole HR thing? That's intriguing to me. I bet a lot of people have already thought about that, but not me.
You're going to have to also be aware of bullying and cyber stalking and hacking. Hacking is going to be very, very easy to do. Is your network secure?
Right.
If you're going to be continuing to do all of this online. And you have to have somebody with HR that's going to monitor and be able to do onboarding, and making sure that they meet all the government regulations that are set out there and keep up with those regulations.
Right.
You know, and to that point, you know, employees too, something that employees perhaps ought to be mindful in hearing this conversation is, just because it's been done a certain way for the past year doesn't mean that it can continue to move forward in that direction, because of all these behind the scenes things that also have to be thought of. So the employee might be thinking, you know what, but we've done it for the past year. We've done it for the past year under emergency circumstances. The emergency circumstances no longer in place. Now we need to go back to doing things in a certain way, or put the infrastructure in place because the law requires it, guidelines require it. And so employees may not necessarily be knowledgeable of that. I certainly, for one, am not knowledgeable about those things. And so employers really impressing upon the employee, these are the reason why the requests that you're making are not possible. We have to be compliant with a number of things. And human resources and employers communicating that in a way that employees can understand and accept.
So really, you know, what I'm hearing from both you guys, whatever we go back to, especially in a business, in an office kind of situation or something like that, it may look totally different than it did when we left. And it may look totally different on, you know, our Zooming or whatever than we've been doing. So whatever it is we're going back to, we might as well just be prepared that we've got a lot to learn.
Yes. And from the counseling standpoint, we're still going to have this anxiety to deal with.
Yeah.
From all of it.
So how do you do that? How do you help someone who doesn't know what they're walking into or expects something different than what they might be walking into?
Listen, be there, help them deal with give them the tools that we can to help them deal with the anxiety. That's all we can do.
You know,
just be there.
There are going to be situations that I'm assuming there will be situations where it comes up where you don't want to do what your employer might be wanting you to do, maybe go to a convention or travel a lot or whatever, and you're just not ready for that. And I guess, yeah, you can bring it up to them, but there's got to be, maybe a counselor might be even help you phrase that, to form that question or response so you're not disrespectful in any way or get yourself, you know, fired.
Yeah, or help them think about maybe it's time to look for another avenue of employment. You know, give them a career test and see if there's something else out there they want to do.
Yeah, you know, and with all of those things, if you find yourself in a situation where you don't feel safe or secure with the new work environment, of looking at other options and other possibilities, because people are having all sorts of conversations about all of these different pieces and there's nuance in it. So for example, let's say you have a workspace where the HR department and the protocol is one in which you are expected to wear a mask. And then you become aware, but I'm vaccinated and the people in my space are vaccinated. We're all vaccinated. Why do we have to wear a mask? And then the conflict ensues, you know? And so there's all these different things that could potentially present themselves, and it'll look different in different work settings depending of the makeup of the employees. A setting where nobody's vaccinated is going to look one way versus a setting where everybody's vaccinated looks another. A setting where there's a mixed group of vaccinated and non-vaccinated people, it's going to look yet another way. And then the employer's protocols and HR's protocols in each of these respective ways are all going to look different. And people are going to make those comparisons. But at that work site, they do it this way. And why do we have to do it that way when they do it that way and we could do it this way? We're walking into something very new, and time will tell how it'll all play itself out.
Wow. And I guess we kind of, although it's been forced on us, we've been kind of running our own show, in a matter of speaking, for some of us who are working from home, because we have our view of office through our computer. And so everything else is just our little, portal there, That's interesting. Well, Kathy, you have brought up a lot of different of things I wasn't even thinking about. So thank you for joining us and talking us through this, and we appreciate it. Okay.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Sure. All right, we'll be back in just a moment. Stay with us.
Louisiana needs a hero.
Someone to look after it, preserve it.
We have to do something now.
If everybody took care of their spot, we wouldn't have this conversation.
We all have to do our part.
The power is yours. All you have to do is pick it up. Care about it. Protect it. Save it.
Be an everyday hero.
Keep Louisiana beautiful.
Welcome back. Obviously, we've all learned some interesting and valuable things along the way as we walked through the pandemic together. Some of those things we learned were how to do the job, to get it done easier, maybe faster, more options and adaptability. It could be a different work world out there as we all go back, though. Transition, time frame. It's going to be all over the place, right?
Right. The notion that we jumped into a new working from home type of scenario for many of us was when it was just done quickly like that. And now transitioning is going to be a little more slowly into a face-to-face situation again. And some of us perhaps are going to be like, why can't we work from home still? We were able to do it for the past year effectively and efficiently. Let's continue to do so. It's important also to realize that there's all sorts of reasons out there as to why it is perhaps best practice to go back to a face-to-face, on-site work scenario. And not only that, perhaps there's some legal and ethical components to that need to be looked at as well. Things that the employee may not be looking at it through their lens, but the employer and HR has to. And so just keeping in mind, with telecommuting, with all of these different things, Ms. Leger just recently mentioned how hacking is an issue, something perhaps that we didn't put an emphasis on the possibility of hacking with telecommuting throughout this year. We kind of let that go because we had to do a cost-benefit analysis. And in the moment, slowing the spread was most important. And then hacking, while important and something of which to be mindful, not a priority compared to slowing the spread. But now that the spread has slowed, now that we are easing restrictions, we're moving into this post-pandemic way of living, including work. We have to do a cost-benefit analysis. It's like we've slowed the spread. But now, if we're going to continue to telecommute, the potential for people to do nefarious things and hacking into classrooms or hacking into meetings and hacking into whatever is there. So employers and HR and legal systems and municipalities and governments have to look into all of that. And then the employer has to take that into consideration and just simply tell the employee, no, you have to come into the office because we have to think of all these things and be compliant because of these things.
Right. Because all this year, hackers have really had a chance to advance too.
They have. And so just things that employers, employees need to really be mindful of as we move into this post-peak in the pandemic, because we're still in a pandemic, but it's perhaps on the other end of it as people have gotten vaccinated, as people have, we've slowed the spread and we have moved into this new phase. But then these other things, we want the convenience of being able to do certain things as we had done it during the pandemic. We see that there's benefits to it.
Sure.
And there's this other piece that we also need to be mindful of as we're transitioning back to a face-to-face working scenario.
My guess is that it's not going to be, okay, this is the way it is from now on. Because, whatever we walk into, if we go back to work, when we go back to work, right, everyone is, mindful of, okay, this is the way I think it's going to work. This is the way I think, and then, oh, this doesn't work. So let's change this. Let's move this again.
And we all have our own ideas. Yeah. We all think that our ideas are the best. We all think that from our perspective, well, this is what I've seen. This has been my experience. And we're not aware of other people's perspectives, other people's experiences, and the ideas that they bring to the table. And this is a reason why this could be in place and why this wouldn't be in place. And we need to listen. We need to be able to listen to one another so we can come up with a best practice protocol. HR knows what they're doing for a number of different reasons. That's why there's a whole industry around that, and that we need to be in tune to that and listen to that and follow protocol. And if there's this particular employer, the one that you currently have, that has protocols in place in this transition phase that doesn't line up with where you are, you may have to reconsider seeking employment elsewhere.
Right. You know, humans don't like uncertainty, do they?
No.
It creates fear and stress because you're like, what is going to happen? What is going to, and it's for everybody.
It does, you know, and if you're that individual who is fearful that you're not certain as to what your work situation is going to look like in this new phase, talking it through, talking out with a mental health professional, someone who can kind of guide you and offer some insight, reflect back to you what it is that you're experiencing, what's contributing to your apprehension, what's contributing to your anxieties and your insecurities and your level of uncertainty, and figure out what's best for you. Because some people may be able to look at things differently and proceed and continue to work within their current workspace. Others may need to find other options to be able to make a living because the conditions now, after the pandemic, no longer suit your needs.
There are going to be so many decisions that people have to make. And sometimes it is nice. I mean, if you have family members or people that you can talk to, or sometimes even coworkers, but that can become dangerous, you know, when you kind of share that kind of information. So as we go into these things, we have a lot of situations that we're going to have to address. And if, you know, even if it's a question to my employer, how do you phrase that without sounding demanding, without talking your way out of a job? Or how can I do this to really make my point? You can get help through counseling.
Yes, yes, and it might not be a bad idea to kind of talk that through in a private counseling situation, as opposed to spitting it out with your employer and then you're like, you know what happened?
Right.
I no longer have a job.
Right. And that's going to help. You know, we already talked in the numbers on the screen about the University of Holy Cross and the counseling sessions that are free right now.
Free of charge, and it is just an amazing thing that the Mary Knights of Holy Cross have been able to offer the residents of Louisiana to get free counseling throughout the duration of the pandemic and even into this new phase as we transition back to life in, I am hesitant to say as we had known it, but life in a new way.
That's right. Well, I mean, not even more normal. That doesn't even make any sense, but yeah.
New.
Yeah. And while we're talking about the University of Holy Cross, there are, when school starts, it's going to look different.
Yes, and we are going back to face-to-face classes, but in addition to that, we also have online classes, independent of the face-to-face classes. So students can go into any one of our programs of study. We have numerous programs of study, and so just go onto the website and look to see what might be of interest to you and register for our online programs at the bachelor's level, master's level, and doctoral level in a number of different disciplines. And we hope to see you in the upcoming semester and know that you can get a wonderful education at the University of Holy Cross.
And you've learned so many things, I know, this past year with online programs and you know, back in person, you know, it's all going to be just a great experience.
We have a number of different things available to meet and suit your specific needs.
Okay, great. And when school starts, you can even do a combo, right?
You could. We have hybrid formats as well.
There we go. All right. Any tips before we go?
Well, we must continue to follow those CDC guidelines. You know, still maintain that distance, wash your hands, hygiene is good. When applicable, wear that mask, and have respectful conversations between employers and employees. Talking to one another, we can find solutions to this new transitional phase into the face-to-face work scenario. You
know, if you give each other grace, it is just, you accomplish so much more.
Yes,
we
can do it.
We can. And just like you say, if you listen before you speak. There we go. All right, well, Dr. Roy Salgado, thank you so much for guiding us through all this during the pandemic and beyond, and appreciate that, and all of your colleagues for being here with us. And thank you for watching. We want to help as we are all coping during the COVID crisis.